Perfect. My favorite part, that really weird voice. So welcome everybody. We're going to get started. We're going to jump right in. I'm really excited for Kyle and Thom to be talking to us about sleep. I don't think that is a topic that can be over talked about because there are always things that we can improve there. So we've got OG Kyle, who has presented a couple times for MVMT before. And as you can see, he's got a lot of letters next to his name. But one thing that I personally love about Kyle is he's willing to kind of jump into any topic and research it and dive deep and actually understand it well enough to explain it to other people without you having to do the research. So Kyle is going to be doing the science side, or we could say the physiology side, and Thom is going to be doing a little bit more of the psychology side, that more communication piece with our clients. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it to Kyle and he's going to get us started, and then we will kind of have a little bit of some polls popping up. We'll have some breakout rooms. So it's going to be really interactive. So make sure you pop that focus time on so you can truly kind of stay present, because there's going to be a lot of interaction in the chat, polls, breakouts as we roll through this next hour. So Kyle, let's get started.
Thank you, Caroline. And thank you for everyone for blowing up the chat. It gave me a good laugh to get this started. But first of all, thank you to Caroline, Ross, and Justin for helping us put this together. You guys are a big help in getting this going, and you made this process so easy. So thank you. So we're going to talk about sleep today. And one of the reasons I wanted to give this was because there's so many presentations on what good sleep can do for you. But there's nothing wrong with that, and they give so much good information. I just think there's less on what's happening when you're not getting that sleep. And if I'm going to give that information, I feel that that might hit home a little more for a client that's not getting their sleep. Because how often is, oh, I had this presentation, I had this, I had that. Oh, but I'm good. Well, we're going to talk about how even with one night, you're not good. And we need to have some behavior change that Thom's going to talk about. So with that, we're going to get going with a little poll here. Well, not a poll, a little chat. So scroll over that chat function, open it up, and I want you to put in what are some of the consequences of lacking sleep.
Focus. Good stuff.
Focus. Thank you, Andy. AJ, exactly. BMR, who was that? Bailey, great job. Reliance stimulants, we're going to talk about that in a case study. Good idea, Jacob. Maddie, boom, boom, mood, that's always one.
Nice. Anger.
Anger, for sure.
We're talking about new dad.
Calories consumed, that's going to come up big later, Tanner. Awesome. All right, so with that, we'll get rolling to our first slide here. So adults generally report that about 30% get 6 or less hours of sleep per night. So we're really going to expand on how much sleep do you need and why that's actually detrimental, and why 30% is a huge number. And we need to get that down, because for psychological and physiological performance, we generally want 7 to 9 hours of sleep, with a minimum of 80% coming from nighttime sleep. And Ashley Hibman asked about naps yesterday. Yes, we will get into those naps, but we won't be taking those here. So I'm going to get into the physiological aspect. I'm going to talk about what's going on inside the body, risks to a good night's sleep, hormonal imbalances and biomarkers, and how those end up changing, sleep restriction versus deprivation, and then some practical implications that you could take right to your clients.
Yeah, and so when we get to my part, first of all, hey, what's going on? I appreciate the opportunity to talk about sleep. It's a big passion of mine. So when we get to my part, it's much more psychology based. It's much more about the next steps, as we like to say. And the big thread to go through all 5 of the points right there is just how can we communicate with people? How can we kind of get inside their minds? Maybe you think of empathy, but the big takeaway is that no matter what the framework is, we can use all 5 of these tools, strategies, these points for all of our communication, not just sleep, but any habit modification or any help we're trying to give to the clients that we have.
So the late dark cycle is what I automatically think of when we talk about sleep. And as we get deeper into Tom's part of the presentation, we're going to see that he's kind of in agreement with me. He's going to dive a little deeper as well. But melatonin is one of the first things I think of as well. So it's released from the pineal gland at night in response to the darkness, and it gives you that feeling of sleepiness. It's going to peak at about 3 or 4 a.m. and then start to drop off from there. And the morning light helps kind of that circadian rhythm of it's decreasing. We wake up and our level of alertness goes up as well. Our alertness changes throughout the day. So we have that immediate increase, then kind of a drop between 2 and 4, goes up from there like early to midnight. And then as nighttime comes and it's getting closer to bed, that starts to go down more. We have a 24-ish hour kind of brain cycle. And it's actually more than 24 hours. But what happens is that every single day, we kind of rejuvenate that and re-regulate that through our whole circadian rhythm and that cycle, which makes sleep super important. When it comes to energy expenditure, we expend more energy when we're awake compared to when we're asleep. And as I think it was Tanner said, RMR and added calories, that's where this is going to play a huge role. So what can alter sleep patterns? Alcohol, especially REM sleep, that second half of sleep, there's a lot more wakefulness. Caffeine, it has about a 6-hour half-life. So you often hear don't drink caffeine after 2 or 3 p.m. just because that can still be in your system when you're trying to go to sleep, and it's going to keep you up and really just delay that sleep onset latency. Hyperhydration, and I would also add eating so close to bed, though there is some science behind a fatty meal before bed actually helping you sleep, but trips to the bathroom, waking up multiple times is kind of the hyperhydration point there. Screen time, we got blue light, and that's going to actually decrease some of that melatonin secretion. So people who are on their phones, on their laptops late at night, that's a negative there. And then stress, really just an overarching for anyone, not just sleep, but mental health as a whole. So we have a poll here, and just think about the clients that you're working with here on Future. Which one of these, when it comes to conversations that you've had with them, has come up the most in regards to their sleep? Caroline, do I get to see these results?
I'm giving people one
Okay,
more second,
okay.
like 85%. I'm
Okay,
like
no,
trying to
just
give
making
people a little
sure.
bit more time. I was going to give them about 60 seconds. So
No, that's fine.
yeah,
I just wanted to make sure I didn't close it out, and then
yeah, no, you're
think
good.
that's
I'll post the results because it'll be cool for everyone to see them.
Gotcha.
So keep it rolling and you'll see them in one moment. I'm going to end the poll, everybody. Ending now. And then now you guys can kind of see what people.
Stress. I definitely put that as the number one. And I think stress and screen time, it turns to more than just sleep. It feels weird saying it for screen time, but it's like more of lifestyle that it applies to, because how many times have you had clients? I know, especially athletes coming in and they're tired and it's like, well, when do you go to sleep? Well, I was on my phone till like 1 and then I couldn't fall asleep till 3. So I think screen time and how often we use it plays a huge role. And then stress, just life happens, and how do we control that? I know Tom's going to get really deep into that later, so be on the lookout for that. So results of sleep restriction. So sleep restriction is getting, for the purpose of this slide and all the data in it, is between 4 and 6 hours of sleep per night. And when we look at everything that's happening here, I think of the kinetic chain and personal training and strength and conditioning. So say we have someone who's over supinating the foot and they're on that arch, right? We go to internal rotation at the hip, which leads to a knee valgus. Often now increased hip flexor activity, we start falling forward. Anterior translation at the knee, chest is falling forward, head and neck, like it's just a snowball effect. And the same thing is going to happen here. So as we go and we have an increase in blood pressure, heart rate, overall sympathetic activity, your cortisol is going to increase and it has a slow decline. What's significant about that is when you first wake up in the morning, you actually have a spike in cortisol and that gradually goes down. But when you're sleep restricted, that decline is more steady and takes longer to go down. With that, we have an increased cortisol to testosterone ratio. And the research varies on testosterone. Some say it does decrease, some say it's no change, but at the end of the day, the cortisol is spiking so much that it's increasing that ratio. Your respiratory quotient is going to go up, so you're relying more on carbohydrate than fat for energy. and an increase in ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, meaning you want to eat more. What's going down? Reaction times, and probably like 60-70% of us here have strength and conditioning experience, but that goes beyond athletes. Think about first responders, health professionals. All these things require good reaction times, or the mom and dad that are out playing with their kids, especially if they're young ones, and you got to be on the lookout 24/7. Reaction times are going to come up big. Glucose clearance. And after just 5 days of getting 4 hours of sleep, your glucose clearance drops by 40%. And if you look at that last point we have here in diabetes, that's going to play a major role because 40% is simply a huge number. We have a decrease in leptin, which is our satiety hormone, and resting metabolic rate. To pair with that, we have an additional energy requirement. So when we're up longer, as I said, our body requires more energy. So for that reason, when we're sleep restricted, we require about 100 calories more of energy, but your resting metabolic rate drops because we want to conserve that energy. What is happening in addition to that? Well, our ghrelin is going up after just 2 days, 28%. And even when you use subjective measures from participants and they just fill out a scale, their hunger and appetite go up 23 and 24%. So it's right in line to the actual objective data that you're getting. And then our leptin is going down 18%. So your hunger hormones are all over the place, or your dietary hormones rather, are all over the place. Metabolic rate is going down. And with those hunger hormones going up now, we actually see an increase of about 500 calories in sleep restricted clients. What's happening there is 500 calories and it's just crappy content. You're looking at decreased protein and increased fat, depending on the studies. Some say increased carbohydrates, some say fat. It seems to be what's more palatable, and that's going to be our sweets at the end of the night. But the protein is pretty consistent, is going down. So the quality of those calories we're getting are not great. And over the course of just 5 days, you see about a 3-pound increase in weight, which is like 1.3 kilograms. When you go down to risk of diabetes, you could go back to that, Ross, thank you. When you look at general sleep, you see less than 8 hours, you get about a 2 times increase in risk of diabetes. And then it's like double that for men. Now, when you look at 6 or less hours, and 2 different studies, so you have varying numbers, but men are at a 3.7 more times risk of getting diabetes, and women 2.3 times. On top of that, it seems to be that men eat more calories when they're sleep restricted than women. So that's also something to look out for, and kind of makes sense as to why men have those higher risks.
So just one thing really quickly. If you see someone that is at risk for things like type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and you go and you say, okay, well, let's try and remove this snack or that snack, but in reality, they're getting 4 hours of sleep each night. What does it matter, right? What does it matter if you change one snack, you change one meal? You're not going to see that. You're not going to see that dial change. You're not going to see a change in their insulin resistance or any of those physiological markers. And just to that reaction time point, just make it more salient. Driving, if you drive, right? And all it takes is a millisecond to make the wrong decision and for tragedy.
Good point. So next we'll go into sleep deprivation, and what's the difference is restriction is a portion of sleep is taken away. Deprivation is zero sleep. So what's happening now, our additional energy requirement goes up by 35 calories. So now it's 135 calories, but again, we're eating 500 more calories. There's this big deficit in a way that we don't want there because we're eating so many extra calories. We see that with deprivation, the effects are more robust. So a lot of what we saw in the previous slide applies right to deprivation as well. It's just those numbers go up with the complete lack of sleep. We see decreased working memory and reaction times. And again, just the importance from driving to playing with your kids, it all plays a role. Muscle protein synthesis and testosterone drop by 18 and 24%, with cortisol going up 21%. And those numbers are just from one single night. We talked about the similarities between them and the differences now. The differences. And when we get into similarities, it's interesting to see there was one study where they did 3 days of complete sleep deprivation and then up to 14 days of 2, 4, 6, and 8 hours of sleep. And the sleep restricted group over time mimicked the sleep deprivation group. So that kind of goes back to what I said at first of even if it's one night, it's going to start adding up. And those that are like, I'm good. Well, look at how quickly that adds up. One night and muscle protein synthesis is down 18%, your testosterone down almost a quarter. it's a big deal and something that we need to change, and something that Tom's really going to get deeper into. Graveyard shift. We probably don't have a lot of clients that fall into this, but I know for me during COVID, I've had 2 doctors in the ER who have had pretty hectic schedules. And what's happening during that time? Well, we see altered lipid and carbohydrate metabolism, but also your cortisol patterns seem to flip. So we have that spike in the morning and then it decreases. But since you work in the graveyard, you kind of have that dip, and then you're going to sleep later on in the afternoon whenever they're getting home. So later in the day, they have a higher cortisol than kind of the normal 9 to 5 shift. So that's something to be on the lookout for, especially when, if you just type in like night shift or graveyard shift in Google Scholar, you're going to find that those who work these shifts consistently are just at such high risk for, metabolic syndrome and everything that entails, like ischemic episodes. They're at very high risk and really need to have a good sleep pattern in the best way that you can, just so that they could be under control. When it comes to their metabolism, after about 2 days, those levels, or they start to level off. But as far as the long term, we really need to get just good sleep competency down in the time that they do have. So how can we help our clients up their sleep quality? Sleep prep and anticipation of a busy schedule. So if you have someone that they already know, they have a big presentation, the next 2 days is going to be rough for them. If they get one night of 10 hours of sleep, you actually see their hormones a little bit more under control. You're not going to completely take it away, but it's just a step to take when it's unavoidable. Let's get ahead of it. Recovery sleep, and compare this to a taper. Depending on how long they've been training and for what the modality is, you're going to taper anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. And the same is going to apply here, depending on how long they've been sleep deprived or sleep restricted. If they go 1 to 9 nights of getting 9 to 10 hours of sleep, you see kind of those homeostatic levels come back. Naps, and one study actually looked at sleep deprived for 4 hours and then just a half-hour nap in the afternoon led to better 20-meter sprint times in comparison to the group that didn't get a nap. And Tom's really going to expand on that later, and how much extra time do we need? And it really varies, but even small ones are going to make a huge difference, as we'll talk about. Improving daily and nightly habits, and like I said about the graveyard shift, that's going to be huge. And even in athletics, Stanford did a study where they had their basketball players sleep for an extra 110 minutes per night, which again, Tom's going to talk about how much sleep do you need or how much extra sleep is going to make a benefit. 110 minutes is a ton, but we can start somewhere and start to build up. But for 5 to 6,
sorry, Kyle. I was just going to say, at face value, 110 minutes sounds like too much. And if you even begin to say something like that to a client, they're just going to close the app, right? Sometimes, but it can be as simple as, hey, with a structured, thoughtful 6-week approach, you have the potential to make the same kind of progress as those athletes. And it's as easy as this. I'm going to give you the steps. We're going to go through it like this. And then as far as this presentation goes, we're going to talk more about those steps. We're going to talk more about that 6-week approach here at the end.
So when it came to that study, the results were a 9% increase in free throw percentage and 3-point percentage. And for those of you that aren't basketball savvy, if we're looking at a pro contract at 9% in both of those, that's literally millions of dollars that they just put on the table right in their pockets. And same thing goes for kind of the naps that we're taking, and an increase in performance there, that if we can scatter them at some point. In that study, it was right after lunch, they took a 30-minute nap. But if we can scatter that in, we can increase some performance. And that kind of goes into our sleep prep as well, and being ready for whatever our tasks at hand are. Lastly is fill the tank with volume and not cake. I talked about sweets and more palatable is kind of what we go for when those 500 calories are added in. When I say fill with volume, it's not even necessarily calories. Like you could, add your veggies to whatever you're doing, but how many people are going to want to add veggies at that time, right? But if we could get them to maybe make a fruit smoothie where it's kind of higher glucose, higher fructose content, so it's sweet, it tastes good to them. And now we just add some ice to it. And Miles and the nutrition team, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 0 calories going in there, but that's going to expand the volume of the shake, and your stomach is going to act like a fuel gauge. You're adding that volume and it's filling that fuel gauge to tell your stomach, hey, I have enough in here. I'm a little more full. The same would go for a protein shake. Rather than shaking it in a shaker, put it in a blender, and there's going to be that frothy part on top of it. And that froth is going to do that same thing, and it's increasing the volume and going to give you that feeling of satiety. So going into a case study here, Chuck is training for a championship fight and is struggling to get a good night's sleep as his training program begins. Chuck's last meal comes between 9 and 11 p.m. after his training is done. His trainer has him working out late to mimic the training schedule with the time that he'll have his match when fight night arrives. Chuck says he has been taking various pre-workout supplements to try and stay ready and energized for his late night workouts, and sometimes sleep supplements, so he's not up all night. He's a fictitious guy, but I'm basing this off. I'm responding to Morton's chat. I loved jujitsu when I was in high school and college, and then he started talking about how he trained at the time of his fight, and it got my attention. And I've always thought about it since then, and it applies here when it comes to sleep. So we're going to put up this poll. And what do you think will impact Chuck the most as he goes through this new training regimen and gets adapted? He's always been one to gain attention for things he shouldn't.
Give it a few more seconds, and then I'm going to close it, and then we'll share the results.
Perfect. Wow, I'm surprised nobody put other. So increased cortisol levels. Like I said, we have that morning spike with a slow decline. And if those levels are high, it's catabolic. It's a stress hormone, kind of it's not physical, but mental health that ties into as well. Ghrelin, it really plays a bigger role than you would think because he is a weight athlete. He has to make weight. And if that ghrelin is up 28% and he's eating more, he can't even fight to make any money. He loses his purse because he can't even fight. Increased sympathetic activity, and that plays a huge role because when we say increased sympathetic activity, it's going to go up when you exercise, when you work out, or when you're fighting. But we're talking about at rest, this is all going up, and kind of his time to a peak heart rate is going to be relatively quick and limit his performance big time. And decreased RMR is going to affect his activity levels, and it ties right in with ghrelin that it might be tough to make weight. For other, so I was wondering if some people were going to put other because I put in kind of the supplements that he's taking, right? So when it comes to those supplements, is he taking caffeine? If so, then he's going to be up even later. And what's the point of these sleep supplements now? He's just kind of negating the effects of everything. But also there's a potential for a non-stimulatory pre-workout. Is it alpha GPC or theanine, something like that to help his focus? And then on top of that, the sleep supplements. What supplement do you think I would recommend for sleep? Anyone that's been here 6 months or more? Thank you. I was waiting for it. Exactly. Tart cherry juice. It actually has small amounts of melatonin, small amounts of tryptophan, and then actually a compound that helps increase the bioavailability of tryptophan. So I do, Becca, I do love my tart cherry juice. And from there, we're going to kick it on to Tom. He's going to talk about behavior change.
Yeah, perfect. So before we start that, I just wanted to open it up for any kind of Q&A. There's a lot of information, good stuff. I just want to make sure everybody was able to connect it and got as much information as they could. Anything yet? Feel free to just turn off your mic and jump in if you want to. All right. All right. So just to go back for a second to that Stanford data, I thought it was good stuff. You know, it's really, really strong data. And like I was saying, we can always frame that in a way that the client's going to be able to hear when you give them like, okay, this is that 6-week structure that we're going to be able to use to get you from A to B. But also there are some really good data that say 15 minutes of extra sleep is all it took to take a pathological sleep disorder, an individual with a pathological sleep disorder like chronic insomnia or someone who just cannot sleep well, they have apnea, whatever it might be. They adjusted their sleep opportunity, what they would call sleep opportunity, by 15 minutes. And they subjectively, on a scale questionnaire, reported increased benefits. So some data we could say, hey, now we have the structure for this to legitimize a 6-week approach, but also there are other data that say it doesn't really take a ton, right? It's not this mountain that you have to climb, but it's just this small tweak that we have the power to make today, right? Okay, so starting off right here, that's what that 15 minutes is highlighting, is that is kind of the time necessary to make significant improvements among all populations, even if it is pathological, like I was saying. And then naps, the guidelines around naps. So first, this slide in general is just what can you walk away with? You're going to have a lot of questions around naps, caffeine. What about throughout the week? Can I change things? How's it going to benefit me? I need my memory in different ways throughout either my job or my social life or whatever it might be. We can talk about continuity versus regularity. And then everybody's favorite, wine, Facebook, that combination, people love those. So we can talk about those in these ways. Caffeine, people are different metabolizers, right? And we've probably heard this before, and you can get into the science with people if they like that kind of thing, but there's a half-life of caffeine. So if you haven't heard this before, a cup of coffee could take as much as 6 or even 8 hours to completely metabolize and leave the body. The caffeine, something like 120 milligrams, can take up to 8 hours for some people. So what that would mean is at 2 o'clock, if you have your final coffee, or if you're some of the people that are post-work, Starbucks, big thing, and it equals maybe 300 milligrams of coffee, for sure you're going to be feeling that coffee when you wake up the next morning, because that's what that half-life means. It takes 6 to 8 hours just for half of that caffeine to be metabolized through the system. So you can talk about that with people. It's not you just go from, the coffee and then you feel less energized and the caffeine's gone. You're not impacted the rest of the day, but it's more of a trickle effect and you metabolize slowly depending on what your genetics are. And it's really just tough to know, except to kind of measure, okay, if we back off on the caffeine a little bit, how does our sleep improve, or how does our sleep change at all, right? When it comes to sleep and wake cycle and timing that throughout all 7 days of the week, this speaks to what we can call social jet lag. So what that would mean is you're almost experiencing a jet lag similar to crossing the country, but it's just because you have such different sleep habits weekday versus weekend. So you are having to get up at 5:30 for work, whatever it might be, and then you tell yourself it's Saturday, it's Sunday, I'm going to sleep in. So you sleep until 9. To your body, to your circadian rhythm, to that master clock, you just shifted, you just transported yourself to the other coast, essentially. And now you have to think about, okay, I'm doing a coast to coast flight every single weekend. Think about how that affects the brain and the body. All right. So that's what we call social jet lag. And that's something to be able to talk to your clients about pretty easily. Alcohol fragmentation. What that will do is it just creates an imbalance in our sleep architecture. We've heard about REM sleep and non-REM sleep. They're very specific portions and a ratio between those two things. So what alcohol does largely, and where it has its most negative impact, is shifting that ratio and not allowing us to have the right ratio of REM to non-REM. So you could talk about that as well. Types of memory. People often think that the cognitive memory recall is maybe your only kind of memory, but think about COVID. There's also a memory to your immune system, the adaptive system. That memory does not improve. Your adaptive immune system does not improve unless you have healthy sleep. That's one of the big connections there. Movement memory, specific to what we do. We're not going to lay down these new patterns of movement without healthy sleep, without that recovery and regeneration. Okay. So if you want to go into more detail about any of these things, I'd be happy to do that. Just Slack me. We can coffee chat about any of them. Okay. And just to get into some more detail, and this is the same kind of thing. It gets a little bit into the weeds of the science a little bit, but I think it's so cool we have to talk about just a touch. So the glymphatic system, just want to touch on a tiny bit more science. Let's say when we sleep, it's essentially our brains have this opportunity to go through the process of breaking everything down that they want to break down, that it wants to break down. It's an intelligent cleaning of dysfunctional cells, and we clear out this precious space in our neural networks. So there's even shrinkage of the brain. You can think about it like New York City, right? So if every night, dirty New York City, I used to live there, I can say that. Dirty New York City, all the buildings shrunk to a quarter of their size, and every citizen that lived in every 5 boroughs came through with a toothbrush and cleaned it up. And then those buildings came back to life next morning. Something like what happens in the glymphatic system, but even more dramatically. because we have many, many more than millions, those millions of people, we have many more millions of cells that go through that process. And again, that can't happen without sleep. So we feel fuzzy, we feel the brain fog. You can make that connection again between here are the biological processes and mechanisms. Here's why you need that sleep. This is probably why you have that symptom today. And I just want to take a second and say, we're trying to direct all these mechanisms and science and strategies toward people, but who, right? Like, go ahead and just chat us real quick and let us know what kind of clients that you feel like you have experienced or what demographics would be perfect for this. And we'll just talk through those a little bit more. So what types of clients you feel like would benefit from sleep coaching? So the anxious and mental health, tactical, literally everyone. I'm with you, Becca. Travelers.
Resident
So
doctors was such a good point because there's added stress with being a resident just because you're the resident and not totally there yet. So there's the stress on you of all those hours. And then
performance
having to go home to Jacob.
weight loss clients. Okay, so you're just hitting such a large percentage just when you talk about body comp, weight loss, aesthetics, right? Yeah. And then if you look at it, you can, remember experienced professionals, you can look and one thing that strings all these together is just people who are pushing, burning the candle at both ends. They're really pushing how much time they spend awake. They're trying to maximize, they're trying to optimize all that stuff. If there's one thing that I'd like people to join me hand in hand with from this is to say, okay, let's optimize a little bit less and let's just focus on being able to recover to see what that recovery is going to get us, what that recovery can earn us. Can we sleep a little bit more so that we can learn more, so that more of what we've done in that day can kind of crystallize and actually create a new and better you the next day? Okay, 3 mechanisms for optimal sleep, and you see where that overlap between the 3 is how we really understand sleep and we start to optimize sleep. Okay, so sleep pressure is essentially what you need versus what you actually get. All right, so sleep pressure and circadian rhythm work independently of one another. So it is possible to have one improve while the other struggles. For example, you're getting more in line with what your circadian rhythm wants, more along with those light dark cycles like Kyle was talking about, but your sleep pressure system isn't functioning the way it should. So sleep pressure is like a tea kettle, okay? So there's this chemical cascade in the brain, like in the rest of the body, through ATP, our energy unit for our fuel unit for our body. Whenever something breaks, whenever the ATP is broken down, you have an adenosine product, right? And the pressure, that sleep pressure is essentially how much adenosine is within the brain from all the work it's doing throughout the day. So as that adenosine grows, sleep pressure grows. And what we want is the greatest distance. We look at this on a graph. Sleep pressure is building, adenosine's building, circadian rhythm is going to determine our energy. Our energy goes down at the right times of the day. So we want the greatest distance between those two. Low energy from circadian rhythm, high sleep pressure. And that's where that moment of I'm exhausted or I naturally fall asleep comes into play, comes into our lives. So sleep pressure, circadian timing, and then a balanced arousal system. It's kind of, you can think of it as like Chuck, right? His ANS. For whatever reason, is he sympathetic? Is he parasympathetic? Where is he at that moment? Is the arousal system too high? So that even if he does have that great distance between his sleep pressure and his circadian rhythm, that he's just too jacked up in general to be able to take advantage of that. Okay, so we have to find that balance. We have to calm the arousal system while still creating that distance to be able to optimize and understand what our relationship with sleep is. Okay, and I'm always going to try to come back to the essentials and the big questions, the original whys. Kyle really knocked out the whys in the first half, and this is going to be more about the how. So just hang tight with me, and we're going to get more into the how in a second. But just first principles, why recovery? We know it's essential for adaptation, right? We don't build muscles, strength without rest days. If we want to learn, we need relaxation. Even skin adjusts when we leave the sun. When we leave that stimulus, our skin gets darker because we have more melatonin released and we adapt, right? We need that recovery time or that break from the stress, the stimulus. Okay, so we see how the autonomic nervous system is going to recover. those bullet points there for improved recovery. We're going to have better results in general. Health and performance are going to improve if we focus more on recovery. And then differentiation, there's a little typo there, so I apologize for that. But differentiation is like what future wants, right? One of the primary principles of why we are here is to differentiate ourselves from everyone else in the fitness industry, especially our direct competitors. How do we make ourselves look at a higher level? Well, we talk about recovery, we talk about sleep, we talk about these things that maybe are lower energy habit changes. I'll talk more about that in a second, that allow people to see the results to get to their goals sooner, right? So differentiation, distinguishing ourselves from the pack. You know, there are millions of us. Let's distinguish ourselves as the best. Okay, let's continue to keep it simple. So we got recovery, we know recovery, we assume that. Now why sleep? There's so many recovery strategies, but why sleep? For sure, my bias, but there's tons of data, tons of research, thousands of studies that say sleep is the ultimate life enhancer, right? It's the ultimate catalyst for recovery. So many peer-reviewed studies. Again, coffee time, we can do this all day long, you know, just throw it in my schedule. But if we look at it again in a clockwise fashion from red, we're going to achieve those body composition changes that was thrown in the chat. And we know that's for a huge part of our demographic or a huge part of our client population. Aesthetics and body comp changes are number one. Skin improvements, increased attractiveness to mates, to potential partners, yellow health, right? This is obvious, but yeah, you already understand this. I know that is, but we have to continue to give evidence for it. We can't make any assumptions about what our clients understands. So even if it feels like, you know, we're talking at a low level, we got to make sure we talk about some of the most basic, lessening of mortality, lessening of disease risk, acute immunity for the sake of COVID, things like that, right? So never skip over assuming that our clients understand things that we take as you know, fundamental knowledge. Performance, another measurement that we come across every single day. How high can I jump? How fast can I move? How much can I squat? How many curls can I get in before my presentation? All of those things are related to sleep and recovery. And then cognitively, of course, you know, if I hadn't slept well last night, which I thankfully did, today would be more of a struggle. It's that simple, right? We have supreme ability to focus. Our memories are organized. Our emotions are better regulated, which is, you know, incredibly important right now. If we get that ultimate life enhancing sleep. All right, let's keep it rolling. So the sequence, the structure, the three factors, I try to make this easy to stick in the memory. The 3 Ps, okay? Number one is predisposing. So you can think, all right, what do my genetics allow for? What are my epigenetic results? What do I experience on a day-to-day basis because of what the environment does to me and what my genetics drive me to do? Those are predisposing factors, okay? Am I more likely to have issues with sleep? That's simple. Number 2, a precipitating factor. A precipitating factor like saving a puppy, Ashley. A precipitating factor like having a new child, Jake, or children, right? Those are major moments that completely change our sleep schedules, how we sleep, our relationships with sleep, major disruptions. It can also be a trauma like a car wreck. It could be, you know, it could be a lot of things. So I'm in the chat if you have other ideas. And then perpetuating is the relationship with sleep. And I like that terminology, not my own, but that relationship with sleep is how I like to communicate about it with my clients. It's not sleep that's bad. It's not you that's bad. It's how you interact with your sleep. How do you think about your sleep? What kind of emotions are tied up in that relationship? Okay. So considering those 3, when we find that overlap, when we understand those 3 for an individual, for your client, that's when we can find what the solution will be to achieve better sleep for them. All right, one more pivot. Stay with me. Setting up the behavior coaching aspect now. So let's make changes that a lot of people want to make high energy habit changes. Let's just put it that way. They come in hyper motivated. What a mentor used to tell me was over exuberance syndrome. And they're like, let me change everything, overhaul time. And we're thinking, okay, pump the brakes. We want low energy habit changes. These are our big levers. This is upstream, low energy habit change. Can we talk about the scheduling of your meals as opposed to counting every single calorie and every single macro? Can we talk about couch to 5K as opposed to couch to marathon? Are you trying to completely change who you are as an individual in your schedule by getting up and setting an alarm 2 hours than you ever have? Or are you just exposing yourself to light at the right times of the day so that you feel more in tune with your natural schedule, with your natural rhythm, so that you have better energy at certain times? Okay. And then you can even talk about, am I going to just be strong-willed and go at it alone? Or am I going to get social support? Am I going to reach out to a coach, right? High energy change versus low energy. We want to emphasize low energy change as much as possible, and that's sleep. 15 minutes of additional sleep, because we've given them the tools. We've helped them create behavior change. That's such a low energy change that's going to create significant results. All right. Now, this system, ABC, it was created by Albert Ellis. We can, again, coffee chat about this. It is also a passion of mine. Someone expanded on it and made it ABCDE. So we'll go through a couple examples. And what I also want you to do is, if you have any other ideas or scenarios or examples, I'd love to hear them. We can kind of expand on them as a group. But let's just go ahead and use this example. So a neighbor, a close friend who you've always had this lifelong crush on. She comes home for the first time since before COVID. You see their car parked across the street, but they don't come over. Why not? Right? Why not? This is the A. This is your activating event, okay? Something happens to a person, to your client, or something happens around your client, okay? So what's next? There's this belief, okay? He didn't come over and knock on my door. I'm not good enough. They don't like me. They never want to see me again. That's the belief, okay? A, that belief. B, leads to C. Belief leads to a consequence, typically irrational, that we want to help correct, okay? So irrational would lead to healthy behavior. Irrational would lead to an unhealthy behavior. And you go, right, cars parked across the street. They didn't come see me. I'm nobody. I'm not good enough. And now you have this different feeling about yourself. Your esteem goes down, okay? So it's ABC. It happens like that all day long to all of us. Sleep can impact that, but it's also something we can impact by helping people modify their behaviors around sleep, okay? So it's very much a positive feedback system. You have greater control over your emotional stability, your rational decision-making, that automatic talk that happens in the brain all day long, if you have better sleep, okay? And if we help people by using this system to improve their sleep, that cycle continues. So this is how we do it. So ABC is what happens, and it's irrational. We come in with disputation, fancy word for we just dispute that belief. We come in and we disrupt the system, okay? So now someone comes home that you haven't seen, your lifelong crush. They don't come over to the door, and you don't think, I'm not good enough. You think, I'm glad they're home and they get to see their parents. They're probably having an awesome time. They get a chance to see their parents. Now you have this idea of a healthy household or an awesome night that they're having. You've disputed that belief. You've changed the belief, and now there's a new effect, okay? And at no point do I want you to take away that this is easy, okay? This is incredibly hard. This is incredibly hard to think of and to be aware of in the moment. But with a coach, right? With a coach, with somebody who's experienced and has this framework, has this structure, we can do this for people all day, every day, okay? I don't know if there's a more powerful thing that we could bring to clients from this whole presentation. So how are we doing on time? Doing okay? Let's give you some examples of that real quick. So in the process of improving sleep and using this CBT and using this behavior change, we're looking for as many downstream effects as possible, right? So we don't have to be only focused on better looking skin or appetite or impulse control or joyful relationships, anything like that. We're trying to pull the biggest lever to have all these things happen at once. So you get communication from people like, I'll never fall asleep. I wake up at the wrong time. I feel awful because I didn't sleep well. And then they keep not sleeping well and they keep feeling worse and worse. What is wrong with me? They can get grave. It could be, man, I have a hard time sleeping, which is negative, right? It's negative, and we can help them shift that to positive. But then that can snowball to, I'll never sleep well. Why am I broken? How come I'm broken like this? Okay. And it could take a while, or that could take no time. But our job is to get there between B and C and to keep that from happening. And again, we could do this for any kind of behavior change, and we face behavior change all day long, right? That's what we do. Oh, I can definitely get you some of these examples as well, if you all want to see those. Okay, one of the last slides here, we're tying this back to circadian rhythms that we talked about at the beginning. So essentially, let's look at that lever metaphor again. Number one, the most important lever is light and dark cycle. Harrison threw it in the chat again, or earlier, about the specific part of the brain that controls what we think controls the circadian rhythm, the circadian clock. And when it's exposed to sunlight at specific times of the day and the right kind of light, it resets, right? Even if our brain goes past 24 hours, like Kyle mentioned, it's going to reset because we got light at the right time of the day. That's our biggest lever. So when we communicate with people about how to make the biggest change, talk light, dark cycles first. Okay, light, dark cycles first. And then after that becomes the topic that's around the social jet lag. That's make sure you're waking up within plus or minus 30 minutes, 20 minutes around the same time every single day. That's going to minimize that jet lag sensation that we're applying to ourselves when we don't keep that kind of schedule. Then nutrition and food timing. This is really interesting because let's put it this way. So that circadian rhythm is upstream and it's affecting all these things downstream, but that doesn't mean that we can't affect the circadian rhythm as well. So, if the circadian rhythm is Greenwich Mean Time and all clocks are based on that, the rest of the clocks are going to affect GMT. But with circadian rhythm, if we start doing crazy things with our meal times, if we start switching up our exercise schedule, what happens? We don't sleep as well. Okay. And then all those things happen when we don't sleep as well, all those downstream effects. Okay. So biggest lever, light, dark cycle, but don't forget that some of the small things like when we exercise and how we schedule and when we eat and things like that, when we have caffeine, those habits can also go back upstream and affect the big guy, the circadian rhythm up top. That final one, temperature. What you see is when you go down the list of levers is you get closer to things like people might find if they go and Google on their own, sleep, how to improve my sleep. It's the sleep hygiene stuff. And that has its place and purpose, but it's not a long-term improvement. It's not a long-term solution. It may help for a night, 2 nights, whatever, and it might be something that improves their idea. That's what it would come back to is now I have a chance to be a good sleeper and improves the relationship with sleep. And then that's where the perpetuating help comes in, right? That they've changed their relationship with sleep now because they've changed the temperature of their bedroom. They made sure that they can stay cool at night. They changed their interaction with blue light. They changed the light dark of the room itself with shades or whatever it might be. Okay. So it would all come back to the relationship at that point, and the relationship with sleep being the most important thing that can be improved. Okay. I think that's all I want to go through for now because I want to leave some time open for Q&A. And the final, I'll hit the slide real quick and then we'll go through the final case study. So I said at the beginning that we have a 6-week structure that we can always come back to if you have someone that, this is condensed, but if you have someone that is sleep oriented, number one goal, this is something that you can take them through. Again, not mine, from a mentor on their permission, but this is something we know works from anecdotal experience, but also built from data itself. So week 1, we can't know where we're going without knowing where we're starting. Of course, we do that with everything else when it comes to goal setting. So one cool thing about sleep coaching is that 90% of us have pretty much the same outcome that we want, right? It's not like nutrition or exercise with, so many different goals that people want. People just want to sleep better, feel better. Okay. Week 1. Now week 2, we approach behavior first because it's most important. That's the belief here. Almost always using a technique, something like CBT or that ABC model. Then we identify that chronotype, which can be pretty difficult, but we identify chronotype through questionnaires and things like that and your tendencies of your body. And we try and interrupt or remove all those interruptions, like extract the poison before trying to add anything else on to their habits or whatever it might be. So we just try to align everything as much as possible within their schedule to their their typical chronotype. Then in week 4, like in week 3, we just try not to add anything more to the routine and lifestyle still. We just remove whatever is in the way, the most chronic negative stresses. And then after weeks 3 and 4, you start to realize kind of that natural potential for sleep. You should be starting to see some improvements here, whether it's just being able to give yourself a greater sleep opportunity or feeling like you're less restless. It could be even symptoms like less night sweats or something like that. People have different kinds of dreams depending on their quality of sleep, because they spend more or less time in REM, or they have more or less cortisol built up while they're in REM. So there's so many indicators for how people are sleeping and what their quality of sleep is like. And then we get into week 5, and that's where some of the sleep hygiene stuff comes in. That's when we can start talking more about specifics like caffeine, alcohol, and we can kind of fine tune, right? That's where we can really twist the dials in a specific way using sleep hygiene. And then again, this is when people have time. If they don't have time and they need something tonight, okay, yeah, sleep hygiene could help. But if they have time and they want to make significant change, long-lasting change, there needs to be a structure like this. 6, we talk about what this is going to look like in the future and how the progress we made over 5 short weeks. We crystallize that thing. And then the conversation becomes, habit change takes something like, 8 to 9 weeks to be solidified into a lifestyle change. So we say, 3 more weeks of this maintenance and you're there. Okay. It can be as simple as that. So we have this structure 1 through 6, and then we talk about maintenance and just making sure that we can keep those habits in place. And then they have that change in their life, that very, very important change in their life. All right. Now, we can do case study now. We can do Q&A now, either one. I think case study is probably the better option. So we'll do that. I'm not controlling. I don't need to touch the mouse. All right. So I'll read this one to you. The great, great, great granddaughter of Daniela Boone, age 47, reports difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep. These problems have been ongoing for many years, but she's never mentioned them to her healthcare provider. She has generally lived with it and self-treated the problem with fill in the blank, whatever over-the-counter thing. Currently, she's also experiencing symptoms of night sweats and restlessness that cause her to spend many nights on the couch. Current medical problems include hypertension, controlled medication. She recently had a mild case of COVID and measles when she was young. Family history is positive for diabetes, type 2, metabolic syndrome, both maternal and paternal. Her medications are ACE inhibitors and diuretics for hypertension. She generally does not like taking medication and wants to solve her health problem in other ways. You're probably thinking right now, why did you add all that stuff in there? Tell me why. Now's your moment. We're going to do a breakout room. Okay, we're going to go ahead and what we decide, Caroline? 5, 6?
Yeah, probably about 5 minutes.
Okay.
4 or 5.
Is there? Yeah. No, it's whatever you think makes the most sense in the rhythm. But I was thinking, how many people are in a room? I don't know how that works.
Oh yeah, we'll probably do about 4 people in a room. So
Okay.
you will be assigned a room right now, so everyone can start popping into those rooms. And I'll also repost this. You can see it again if you didn't screenshot it in your breakout room. So just jump into those rooms and talk about this, and then we'll pull you guys back.
Okay, so while you're in there,
Did Tom accidentally go to a room? Did those of you who are still on not get put in a room? Okay, now it looks like.
Yeah, let's try and pull them back. Like right at time, I would think, and maybe, finish off there. Is that what you're thinking?
I was actually hoping to address some questions that were in the chat too, because Tanner and Harrison both had good comments.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally fine as long as people are okay with staying over,
Hey guys.
Yeah, where are you, Molly?
Nobody nobody was in my room.
Let me just
Interesting.
let me find you. Oh, wait, hold on. I don't see Ross. Oh, here you are. Okay. Okay, Molly, you should be good now.
Thank you.
Carolyn, I don't know if you want to pause the recording for now while everyone's in their room.
Light bulb moment. If they had a light bulb moment, if they felt like it kind of connected for them when they started talking about it, if anyone had that moment or that feeling or something like it, just go ahead and come off mute and talk to us.
I think I did a little bit, Tom, like going back to the 3 Ps, like looking at the predisposing factors, the precipitating factors, and then the perpetuating factors. Like she seemed to have like all of those going on, like, and you can piece them out like very easily.
A good point. That's a good point. So that's a really good place to start, because in the presentation itself, I did say that there was a sequence. So if you can identify what the predisposing factors are, you know at least that you're dealing with that. The one thing I said with Lexi in our group is that some people, and this wasn't even me in college, but some people like to take highlighters and they highlight different things in their textbooks or whatever, and they use different colors, they color code. One thing I would suggest is take a color, highlight the stuff that we have no control over. We can't change her family history. It's out of scope to talk about her ACE inhibitors and her hypertension and whatever, and maybe you're lucky enough to talk to her doctor one day and you can collaborate, but that's not right now. What you can do is talk about that relationship where she has generally lived with it. Like those words tell a whole story, right? That struggle, that stress, that's a negative relationship with sleep. She talks about sleeping on the couch often. Okay, how can we help her adjust that? Can we change the couch? Can we do something to have her feel better about going back and forth from the couch to the bed? All right, so highlight the things that you shouldn't touch right now. Highlight the things that absolutely are the biggest opportunities and the biggest targets right now. Be able to differentiate between those two. So it's almost like you take this huge chunk of information, you turn it into 2 sentences, and you know what your mission statement is right there. Righty. What else? All right. So the last thing I would say is just, how do we deliver, and how can we deliver it thoughtfully? How can we talk about it thoughtfully? If you have a negative relationship with sleep, you're in pain, you're stressed, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, it's probably all those things. You're really stressed out and you're in pain. So be cautious, be kind, be empathetic, be patient, put yourself second or third, whatever it might be. Try not to get hurt by anything they say to you. This goes back to what we've been talking a lot about, customer service. People will fly off the handle. Can you imagine, someone hasn't had good sleep for 6 months. Yeah, they're probably not going to text very well. Yeah, they're not going to respond in an intelligent way to you. So you just got to be so patient and careful with people, and they'll respond quickly. They'll respond like, oh, okay, you're being really good to me. You're trying to help. Let's do this. Let me open up. So communication, huge. Let's just leave these last moments if anyone wants to stay on to talk about some more detail here on this slide, or talk about questions that we can answer.
I actually wanted to go to the chat here and just acknowledge some things.
Cool.
So first, and Tom, feel free to chime in with me here. Tanner asked that if there was somebody who works out at night and it's the best working for them, would we suggest they work out at a different time? And I think I would say you can't always just point to a study and say maybe sleep will, or working out at night will decrease your sleep, because for some people it just works. It's like when they talk about if you do cardio with your lifting, you're going to lose your gains. But if somebody likes running, and especially maybe a marathon is their goal, there's kind of give and take there. So I think if it works with their schedule and it's in their kind of circadian rhythm that they've kind of created there and what works for their day. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say change it because it's what they're accustomed to and what's going to help them be at their best. So yes, there's some things that say maybe don't work out so late, but it's kind of the give and take and what works for the client.
Yeah. So that's about everything that I would say. I'll add a couple things. And what you said about circadian is really important. Circadian rhythm is really important. More than likely, after years and years of doing something and thinking this is what I want to train, this is what feels right to me, they're probably right. Trust them. They know their bodies. If that's their high energy moment and that's when they have their motivation, that's their chronotype. Okay. So I don't know who I think I'm speaking to right now, but that could be their chronotype. And just allow for that. And then what you can do to make up for it is, okay, you're not going to finish training until 11 and then you want to eat. We can work through that. Let's just make sure that you have perfect recovery, or let's just make sure you have really good recovery strategies in place. And we'll make sure to dial down the volume so you get back to a place where you're feeling like you're restful. You're not overly aroused. You're not overly alert, so that you can be prepared to go to sleep. And that's when we can give them some sleep hygiene stuff, hot, cold, contrast shower, whatever it might be. Let's drop that core temperature and set the body right so that you can get some sleep. So changing someone, interrupting what they do, disrupting their patterns, bad idea. I think just overall to begin with, work with them and then see if you can modify things to something that feels more standard maybe, but no, disrupt and completely change, that's a no-go, I think.
And then last two, was that Tanner? So then Harrison, he asked about maybe we could see a study in college coaches and sleep. It's like, Harrison, I'd love for you to come on and kind of give me your thoughts on that. And what that made me think is, how is college different from high school and professional? And it's kind of that recruiting. So maybe do we make an extra like dead recruiting period where they have that extra time to kind of recoup? But I would just love to hear your thoughts on what went through your head as you thought of that. If Harrison is still here.
Yeah, hey, still here. Yeah, I mean, I just kind of thought of that because I'm coming here from the college setting, and I mean, I guess it still applies for maybe less high school coaches, but definitely college and professional. I think we preach to our athletes and to our, clients all the time the importance of sleep and all this kind of stuff. But it's kind of like, strength confessions of a strength coach, like do as I say, not as I, or do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, right? Like how many college coaches out there, strength and conditioning, sport coaches, whatever, can look their athletes in the eyes and say, I got 8 hours of sleep last night, or, like I follow good sleep hygiene, right? So it's kind of one of those things. Like, are we pouring from an empty cup when we tell all of these athletes and clients what to do when we don't even really have the ability, those coaches don't even have the ability to do it themselves a lot.
Perfect. Thank you. No, definitely good food for thought. And then my last is actually a question, if Allison is still here.
Oh, I want to talk on what Rob said if we get a chance.
Okay. Just quick question for Allison. So I referenced the Stanford study. I don't remember the year that it was published, but were you there? Because I've been around published research and the results don't always completely mimic kind of what actually happened. Not saying,
Yeah, I was there.
I'm putting that negatively, but I don't mean that in such a negative way, but is that spot on with the 110 minutes? And did you happen to interact with that in any way and see the effects?
I wasn't working with the team, but that did happen. The team did see, because that was Corey Schlitz or whatever that, I can't ever say his last name. But Corey was there running that study, and he spearheaded that because there's a whole sleep department at Stanford. So they partnered with the university, and there's a big time sleep researcher that I've seen speak over there. And they did use the basketball team, and they had a killer year that year. And it took a little while for the guys to buy in, but I mean, typically college basketball players like to sleep anyway. So I think it was an easy buy-in when they adjusted like practice schedules and things too, where I think that was the year they practiced later in the evening, but they adjusted all the guys' classes. So they slept more in the morning. I vaguely remember that's what they did, but it was successful. Like,
Awesome. No, that's
like
awesome.
you presented them.
Thank you.
Sorry, were you saying that you thought you remembered them starting to sleep sooner or sleeping longer?
They were sleeping longer, but I believe they were able to sleep longer in the morning hours opposed to going to bed earlier. I think
Cool.
that's what they did.
So that doubles down, if anyone's interested. The architecture there is that if you sleep later, especially if it comes in line with your circadian rhythm, you get more sleep on the tail and you have more REM sleep, which is going to be different if you're to somehow have more non-REM sleep. And it's going to completely change the way you generally are more emotionally stable after REM sleep. That's when you have the most dreamlike state. So it can be kind of, you wake up in an emotionally different way, but it does tend to align with emotional regulation and modulation when you have more REM sleep. That's cool. Oh, Rob, you still on?
Yeah.
Will you just cough?
Yeah.
Mute?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I forget where I read it from, but I thought I read something like with the study that was saying that they found that I don't think it was something about, I couldn't remember if it was saying something like lost sleep it was making up, or it was the damage that occurs from lack of sleep. So when the body's right in that inflammation with the cortisol levels, I was reading that something like a 20-minute HIIT routine the following day can actually make up that lost damage.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd be really interested to see what the variables are. Like what's the dependent variable that they're trying to
Yeah, I'll
measure?
try to find that study. And I was just asking if anybody's heard of that or.
I haven't, honestly. Unfortunately. That's cool though. Yeah, if you do,
Throw that
definitely.
in brain gains in the Slack page if you find that.
Yeah, let's find it. The guy at Stanford. Who are you thinking of, Allison? That's the only person I know. Is that Corey something?
Yeah, he's now in Arizona with a pro team. Redheaded
Oh.
guy. He's got a crazy Instagram.
Okay, I'll look.
Corey.
But he
That one.
focused on sleep.
Justin's got it.
Schlesinger.
Yep. Yep.
Nice. That name does sound familiar. Cool.
Yeah. But the researcher, I'll look it up. I'll know when I see it. I'll drop it in Brain Gains.
The director there is Kushida, Kushida. But he does, his name is on a lot of studies, but probably people like Corey are doing all the legwork and his name goes to the top of the study for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, that dude. All right.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And thank you to everyone who kind of stayed on and had a little banter here. And Kyle, Thom, thank you for just sharing your science thoughts, experience with sleep. And I'm excited to kind of have this presentation in our back pocket for future, as we shared that tart cherry one and Andy got pretty excited about that. So thank you guys, and just look for that survey that I'm going to post here in a few minutes. But have a great rest of your Wednesday, everybody.